Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start our Government Operations and Fiscal Policy work session on Bill 10-19, Legislative Branch Economic Impact Statements Amendments. This will require an economic impact statement for each new bill to be prepared by the Office of Legislative Oversight. It also adds further specificity to the content of the economic impact statement. It was introduced on May 7th. We did have a public hearing on June 11th, and the lead sponsor is Councilmember Friedson. The co-sponsors, Council members Albornoz, myself, and Council members, Council Vice President Katz, Rice, Glass, Hucker, Reamer, and Jawando. It's just a big party. All right, so first let me see whether my colleague, the sponsor of the bill, has introductory comments, and then we will begin in a conversation regarding the bill with Mr. Drummer as well as Mr. Cavillieu, and I see also that we have OLO Mr. Selar here as well. But Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you so much to the Council President and Vice President and all of our colleagues for being co-sponsors of this legislation. The bill would require the Director of the Office of Legislative Oversight to prepare an economic impact statement for each bill and modify the required contents of the economic impact statement. This is something that we have talked about since the moment I took office, supporting our local businesses being a primary focus of what we wanted to do while we were here, and making sure that the private sector has a formal part of the process, and this was an opportunity to strengthen our economic impact statements that got made and requiring them so that it's a formal part of the process of every non-emergency piece of legislation that we have. I think this is part of the broader commitment that this entire council has made to focus on economic impact, to make sure that we aren't just focusing on what the impact would be on the county budget, but what the impact would be on the budgets of Montgomery County residents and Montgomery County businesses. And I think this is very much in keeping with the spirit, as we've done in many other aspects and many other contexts. This is one other opportunity where we can demonstrate that we are really serious about this, we're really focused on it, and that we want to make sure that this is a formal part of every conversation that we have here about growing our economy, supporting our local businesses, and making sure that we maintain Montgomery County as a great place to live, work, and play. I particularly wanted to thank you, Chris, Mr. Selar, for your support here. I'm particularly pleased with the fact that you have worked to ensure that we can do this within existing resources, which is tremendous, and allows us to really take these to the next level and make sure that we have a professional economist on staff, that we take over this responsibility in the Office of Legislative Oversight, which is where I think it appropriately should be, and that it is strengthened and done in a way that doesn't hamper and isn't competing against some of our other budgetary needs. So I think this is a win-win-win for everybody. I'm really appreciative of the support, and I hope to get through this committee hearing with the bill intact. So thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Drummer, walk us through the bill and the particular decision points that we need to
Good
make.
afternoon. Bill does, as you said, two major things. One is it moves, economic impact statements have been required by law since 2012, I believe, 2010. So it's not new that we do an economic impact statement. What's new is who does it. And it's been done so far by the Department of Finance. They have two people that spend about 5 to 10% of their time, according to finance, doing that. This would move that function to the Office of Legislative Oversight. Legislative oversight, that's the one part of the bill. The second part is to make some changes in specifically what we're requiring in an impact statement to be more addressing effect on local businesses. And those are the two major parts of the bill. The change to OLO would require, in fact, creating a new position. They don't have anybody in OLO currently who's qualified to do this. They would have to create a new position and then fill it. or do it by contract, although it's my understanding they plan to do it with an employee. The employee would probably not spend 100% of his or her time on this and would be available to assist council staff on other matters. An economist's input would be helpful, including, Mr. Seelar, I guess, can explain what he would envision doing with this position, but the position would do a little more than just these economic impact statements. It's been represented that they would do it with existing resources. It's creating a new position. It's not free. They may be able to shuffle around and find savings elsewhere to pay for it, but it's not free. Let me see. One of the questions that came up in the public hearing is, should the bill add a requirement to estimate a bill's effect on climate change? And that's an interesting idea. It's probably not something the same person might do, and it's probably beyond the scope of the original bill. And if you want to do that, it might require either a new public hearing for this bill or a separate bill. I would suggest a separate bill because I'm not sure you would ask an economist to do that for you. You may want to look at someone with a science background to do that. So it's probably a different part of the bill. So our recommendation is to leave it out of this bill. It may be a good idea to look at. Certainly climate change is an urgent problem. And it's something that we can certainly consider, and we have. I mean, we have offices in the executive branch that look at this, as far as county operations. The other question that's come up is there's a provision in the existing law about economic impact statements that says that a bill is not invalid because there was no economic impact statement. That was originally put in because it was Department of Finance that was doing it, and it would essentially give the executive the power to stop legislation by just telling the finance director, don't send over an economic impact statement, and then the council couldn't enact legislation that there may actually be support for. So it clearly doesn't make sense when the executive branch is doing it. This bill has a compromise, and it talks about it would not invalidate an expedited bill, which is a bill that the council needs 6 votes for, that would be enacted and have an earlier effective date than 90 days after it becomes law, but would still invalidate a bill that's not considered an expedited bill if there, in fact, was no economic impact statement. Council staff still sees an issue with that. It's not what we would recommend because I think you're creating an argument that could challenge a bill in court for either the procedural argument that, well, you simply didn't submit an economic impact statement. Admittedly, the council will have much more control over whether there's an impact statement. The executive couldn't hold it back because it's coming from OLO, and OLO is in the legislative branch and works under the direction of the council. So, is that likely to happen that there wouldn't be one? Probably not. And could the council make sure that there is one? Maybe. Probably. I guess what concerns me is I just can't predict the future. I don't know what would happen in the future, and I don't know if some court would say, well, would entertain it. I would hope not, but would entertain an argument that, well, yeah, they submitted an economic impact statement, but it's insufficient. They didn't really look at this, this, and this, so this bill is invalid. And that would just create litigation on legislation that the council's already enacted that may not be necessary but for this provision. But is it likely to happen that, I have a lot of confidence in OLO and Mr. Seelar, and I'm sure that there would be an economic impact statement that would be adequate, for every bill if that's what he's told to do. But it just creates an argument that could come up. So that's one recommendation we have, is to leave the language, the existing language in lines 40 to 42 in the bill that would just make it clear that failure to have an economic impact statement is not a reason to invalidate an otherwise valid law. I will point out that I did hand you some testimony that didn't get into the packet for, I actually can't explain what happened, but just for their benefit, these people, it's really one person and the person's lawyer. They're complaining about this provision. They're complaining about the exemption that doesn't require I may be confusing things, but doesn't require a bill to be to have an economic impact statement if it's an expedited bill. I think they're misreading the law. The law requires expedited bills to have an economic impact statement. It just simply says that it's not invalid just because it doesn't have one. So I just wanted to point that out to you. That's why I handed you that testimony. But back to what I was talking about, I don't think, I would recommend that you not make that change and leave the existing language on invalidation. But other than that, I recommend the bill. I think bill makes sense. I think the council should have control over this. I think we'll get a better product this way, and I think the availability of an economist to the central staff and the council members for other tasks would be very useful.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. I would agree about adding the economist. I do think that we're also right now on a parallel track, having conversations about how to best strike band our council, capacity in terms of our staff and our analysts and the expertise. And I think this would definitely be a particular area where we could use an economist for a lot of other issues that we need. So I think I would definitely support that. I think on the other issue, that does concern me a little bit about when you were describing, Mr. Drummer, regarding that, that a bill will be invalid if it doesn't have the statement. It's I don't know. I feel a little uneasy about being so strict with that, but we'll see what my colleagues want to do. Councilmember Friedson.
Totally appreciate that. I appreciate the staff recommendation. I share the view of the broader benefit of this. I'm not sure if Mr. Seeler has the same view of this not being able to be free. Nothing is free. We're investing the money. The question is, can we reallocate resources within the department in order to fund the position? So it's net zero and free are not the same thing, but my understanding, if you could just correct the record on that you see this as a net zero impact, meaning you don't see this having currently or in out budget years a significantly different budget impact than existing resources.
Well, I was on Chris Seiler, Director of Office of Legislative Oversight. I guess first let me quickly get to the concern about the bill being invalid. The only thing I would say about that, I'm kind of neutral on it. The concern I would have is once we start this, that person in that position might not be there forever, and there's always a gap in terms of hiring. And so that would be the only concern I would have. And I could write an economic impact analysis statement if I had to, but that's why we want the economist here. So that would be, one kind of concern that I would have. In terms of the cost of the bill, so I've worked with HR. I've gone through it already. This is a new assignment for OLO. We're going to be able to reallocate resources. We're going to cut a position. Basically, we're going to riff a position that is no longer needed in our office. That money, plus we have $20,000 in consulting money that was for an economist. I mean, in general, it's allocated towards an economist that will go to pay for this position. So it's pretty neutral.
But I would have a little bit of a concern with that. I mean, I think that during the budget, this committee worked very hard to make sure that you would have resources for consulting because there are so many different policy areas.
That's exactly right. But there's money that's specifically for an economist, yes. So it's not all the money. It's not all the consulting money. This is only the money that would be for the economist. So the money that was already allocated for the economist, we actually had in last year's budget, it was written up that if a council member requested, we could hire an economist to write economic impact statements that came from when we did the minimum wage bill.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was always held as money that we had. That money would then be allocated just to this economist. We'd obviously not need, right? So that money plus the position that we have in the office, adding new responsibility allows that position to be riffed because it requires us to move resources around to fulfill the council's requests. I don't anticipate that impacting service much. Technology has gotten so high that position that we have previously used to do such things like filing just kind of isn't required. I put this in last year when we had a request from the executive for budget savings. I put in, to meet the budget savings, we would riff the position. It was rejected from the executive. But again, it's not something that I think will impact service from OLO. So the combined savings from that position plus the economic impact analysis consulting money meets generally what this position would be. It just depends on what level we hire.
I appreciate that clarification. I think it's important. And again, I appreciate your interest and willingness to figure out how to make this work. And I do see a much broader benefit to the additional conversation. Just like, focusing on the economic impacts is a broader conversation than just how do we do it with legislation. I think strengthening OLO and strengthening the legislative branch's role in that process is also a broader conversation. I think this will help in a broader way. I do want to speak, though, to the I have real concerns about changing the bill as drafted. One of the whole reasons for this bill was to give teeth and to strengthen this, and to remove that would to take out a significant part of the whole purpose of this bill, which is to send a message of how seriously we take these issues. And to me, the argument to say that while I respect that it's your role to protect against any potential, as small as it might be, legal rationale that there could be to litigate against county legislation, the same argument could be made that we shouldn't then require public hearings, because somebody could argue that the public hearing wasn't sufficient in some way, that we didn't do it the right way, that the timeline would be. But we've made a decision that public input is an important part of our legislative process, so we require public hearings. And if somebody wants to sue us because they don't think we did the public hearing right, then so be it. Good luck. And I feel the same way here. We either think that it's important or we don't. And I think to weaken the bill that is specifically being put in place to strengthen the process with which we assess what the economic impact will be of policy would be to completely undermine the intention of the legislation, and I think that it would be a mistake. And so while I respect the reason for it, I am opposed to it, and I hope that we can keep the language as it was drafted. And I think, to Mr. Drummer's point, we already compromised, right? So as we were drafting this, we thought about the concern about expedited bills, and so we have compromised. And so, at a certain point, when you compromise on a compromise on a compromise, you end up drifting off from what the intention was. And I think the initial compromise as drafted is appropriate. I think to compromise on that compromise would weaken it to the point where I think we would be missing the original intention of the legislation.
Is the requirement going to be that a economic impact statement be included? Or is there any particular qualifying information so you forward the impact statement? I'm referring specifically to the minimum wage. The reason why that money ended up putting there is because we all got to the place where we understood that in order to have a minimum wage impact, statement, there were so many different studies out there. It was almost impossible to find one somebody couldn't challenge, right? So at some point, the council had to make a decision to say, yes, okay, we have, analyzed as much as we can, et cetera, but is this sufficient? So then you have, paralysis by analysis. So I'm trying to, is the requirement here, and I guess Bob or the sponsor, is it that we have an economic impact statement, or are we then going to get into, well, no, I don't think this is sufficient. Well, who was the source for this, et cetera? And then we don't pass any laws because we're waiting for that perfect impact statement to satisfy 9 council members.
I guess I would say, when it comes to economic impact statements and economics in general, it's not a hard science. There's not going to be a right or wrong answer. It goes from A to B, and you can get 2 people on the different sides, and they're going to give you a different type of analysis. That's why I don't really have a concern about getting a bill in, about getting a statement in for bills. We can do it in my office. I mean, I can write one if I have to. The nuances that Bob brings up, I don't know the legal ramifications of that, and so there will be gaps at some point in the future where we don't have an economist on staff because there's a gap in that hiring. That doesn't mean that I couldn't write one. I mean, I have expertise in different types of analysis. I have staff that have expertise in different types of budget analysis, and so, it's real hard, I think, to argue that there's a right or wrong way to write an economic impact analysis statement. I'm not a lawyer, though, so I don't want to, make a judgment on what somebody.
No, I understand that, but but
it's a very nuanced.
Whether the bill's going to be invalidated or not, that's a very important.
It's a very nuanced science.
May I interject?
Yes, Mr.
I'm
Covey.
sorry, I'm Mike Covey with Finance. The county attorney's office actually agrees with staff on this. The issue is one of nuance, that economic impact means an estimate of the costs and or benefits to private organizations and individuals, so on and so forth. You have to take into consideration these particular things. And they're also worried, along with Mr. Drummer, that people are going to file suit against the county to basically keep a bill from really being effective, becoming law in actuality, because they're going to attack the fact that the economic impact statement did not cover all of these things comprehensively. It didn't cover my organization, or it didn't cover this entity or this individual. I think, and I haven't talked to the county attorney's office about this, but I think if it was actually a more circumscribed rule that there be an economic impact statement. I mean, I think part of the reason you want to move it from the very excellent work that finance has done on these over the last several years, very comprehensive, very accurate economic impact statements, knowing that not every bill that the council looks at actually has an economic impact. But things like minimum wage bills and everything, we brought in outside people to look at those. No comment beyond that. But the fact of the matter is, this is going to leave us open to basically spurious claims on bills that are also going to hold them up from being enactable. So the county attorney's office also agrees, in a nutshell, with Mr. Drummer's concerns on number 3. And I agree. I understand the argument on it. Maybe it can be tightened up a little bit. Maybe it should just say an EIS is required, and that's it. Part of the reason, as I started to say, for moving it from finance to OLO is so that it's not the executive doing this. It's your own staff that's doing this, and you inherently trust them more than you trust us.
We trust you.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah. So anyway, I would ask you to please consider following Mr. Drummer's argument on number 3, and leaving that particular section of the current law the way it is, or maybe bolstering it.
Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the conversation. I don't understand why we just couldn't say a statement or have a boilerplate statement on every economic statement that we receive that says that if something is not covered by the economic statement itself, that it was considered, and that when the law is voted on, or the legislation is voted on, that we've taken that into consideration. And therefore, if it passes, knowing that the economic statement was considered and found to be valid with this bill. And to me, that would take care, because otherwise, to Councilmember Friedson's point, you could have somebody that says, well, you took in A, B, and C, but I really disagree with B. And, so therefore this law should be invalid and we should take that to court. Well, that's not what we're after. We're after trying to figure out how much it's going to cost somebody and the economics of it. And I think if we go too deep into these weeds, we're just going to have problems on every other thing we ever do. So I think there needs to be some sort of a statement on the legislation itself that says we've considered the economic development, the economics of this. If it's not mentioned, we're still good. Thanks.
So I appreciate that, and I feel very strongly about this. And but I guess could I make a question of whether, if the concern is that we've specifically laid certain things out in the legislation that says must, could we make, if you look at line 26 on the bill and make the first two items, so that reads content of economic impact statement, and it specifically refers to it. Each economic impact statement must include, and keep that for numbers 1 and 2, which is the sources of information, assumptions, and methodologies. And then 2, a description of any variable. I mean, that is boilerplate. Every valid, reasonable economic impact statement would have that. But then number 3, say may include the bill's potential positive or negative impact, if any, on employment, the county's workforce, taxation policy, property values, incomes, operating costs to businesses, so that we are sending guidance to OLO that that's what we expect to be included in it. But if one aspect of that is not done to somebody's satisfaction, it wouldn't necessarily be a grounds for a challenge. Would that satisfy?
I have a different suggestion.
Okay.
Rather than, I think that might help, but you still end up with an argument, a potential argument as to the sufficiency of the EIS. I would add maybe a sentence after line 42. So we leave in, it said council action on an expedited bill that is otherwise valid is not invalid because of a failure to follow the requirements of this section. Then I would say a bill that is not an expedited bill must not be enacted if no economic impact statement was considered by the council. Something like that. I'm trying to say that, it's the submit, it's the actual, the receipt and consideration of the EIS rather than the content of it. A bill, so I'll try it again, and this may not be perfect, probably not. A bill that is not an expedited bill must not be enacted if no economic impact statement was received.
Your purpose, let me just, you think of the words, but I think, is the idea here, I'm just trying to understand what the purpose is before we pinpoint the language. Is the idea to definitively say the intention, which is that we've received an economic impact statement?
And it was considered.
And it was considered?
Yeah, don't
follows
challenge
the
it on
requirements of
that
this
you don't
section.
like that you think it's
That's the key.
insufficient.
That's the key phrase. It follows the requirements of this section.
I'm just concerned about the way you're doing is there's a couple double negatives in there that makes it, I know that confusing works.
I think there's better language, but if you're doing what it sounds like to me that you're doing, I'd be okay with definitively saying that you must enact something, in order to be enacted, it must, a economic impact statement must be received by the council pursuant to this article or whatever. And then the idea is it's the receipt of the economic impact statement, not the value, or the
Right.
academic quality, it's a quantitative question. We either did it or we didn't do it, not a qualitative question. Was it to somebody's satisfaction? And of course, there could always be somebody who says, and there certainly are here, that we didn't do things the way that they would have liked it.
How about a bill other than an expedited bill must not be enacted if the council did not receive and consider an economic impact statement? How does that sound?
And I'm okay with that, but I'm sorry. I'm okay with that, but the question is, what is that clearing up with the rest of the statement? When we go back to what Andrew was saying before, that we, rather than have the must, it's the shalls.
Right. Because it seems like it's quite prescriptive and the musts include this. What if it doesn't include one of those things?
Or what happens if what happens if they're all shalls? I mean, we don't have to agree to it unless they come back with what we want.
Circle 2 on,
So we're back to
26.
Andrew's language, just
Saying
changing
should.
3 and 4 as may,
Or
or just 3?
Or should, yeah, should, rather than shall.
Yeah, and I think even 4 is probably a shall, but I think 3 is the area where it's very prescriptive, and
Right.
if you wanted to say shall in terms of specific policy guidance, as opposed to must, which is prescriptive, exact, I could get around that and feel like we're not completely undermining the intention of the legislation.
because then what it does is that it speaks to the fact that, the statement must be included. And it gives some guidance in terms of what should be considered. And that way, I think that is the intent.
Yeah.
And that it's OLO who's going to do it instead of finance.
Is OLO?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Again, the only concern I generally have is, in this discussion, it's just economic analysis in general is not a hard science. And so what you are going to get, I don't know legally what would happen in court. So,
But I think if it says shall, because,
I'm
in
fine
the
doing
back
the
of my mind,
analysis.
I'm already thinking ahead of when we adopt legislation on racial equity and social justice. And we are going to be requiring some kind of impact statement. But the idea is that it has to be in front of us, right? Like, you can't pretend that it's not. It's the same thing here. Like, it has to be in front of us. Now, we're going to make decisions, but it's going to be informed decisions. So I think that's what you're trying to
Yes,
get to.
it's
right?
consideration.
Exactly.
It's
We
the
can't
whole-
say, oh, we didn't
totally.
know.
The whole purpose of this, to your point, exactly, is we need to be required to consider
Consider it.
the economic impacts of what's happening. It doesn't mean we do it perfectly. It doesn't mean we do it exactly how every resident would like us to do it, but it means that we are doing it and that we are serious about it and that we have formally included it as part of our legislative process. So
Yeah.
that's why I think if we change the prescriptive element of this to may, so that it's providing guidance but not requirements of exactly what you include. I hope that you would include all of them on everything, but perhaps you wouldn't. But it would, I hope, would then satisfy the issue. I mean, my other view of this is, listen, we're never going to prevent, we couldn't, if our goal was to prevent any chance that anybody would ever sue us ever, we would literally never pass another bill. Again, particularly, I represent District 1. We probably have more lawyers per capita in District 1 than any place in America. It's a wonderful place, but it's, I think we don't want to be so careful that we should be thoughtfully careful, but not so careful that we prevent ourselves from doing what we intend to do here, which is make this part of the formal process.
I generally think we can write an economic impact analysis statement that deals with all these topics and all these issues.
Yeah.
The must or shall is kind of beyond my area of expertise, but certainly we
think
could write
that's-
something that will have it. Will somebody disagree with us?
I think this should. I think that.
I think the changing on number 3, paragraph 3, lines 32 to 38, the actual content to a should or a may include, I think that helps the argument that it's going to be harder to challenge the sufficiency of the economic impact statement, but I think it also weakens the prescription that this is what we want. The contents need to consider the positive and negative effects, if any, on the county's workforce, taxation, policy, et cetera. I mean, I think that was a big part of the bill to say you have to consider these things. So, I still.
Well, if you're asking the bill sponsor, if the bill sponsor feels stronger about allowing ourselves not to do these if we don't feel like it, which is the language that you've suggested, or being less prescriptive in what is in the contents, I would say requiring that they occur. And, part of the benefit to this is the contents of it, we have more control over our expectations because it is not in the executive branch. And while I totally appreciate the work the executive branch has done, this isn't to diminish that. It's a question of span of control and whether or not it's 5 or 10% of a couple people's job or whether we're hiring somebody where this is a primary focus. It's just, everybody has a lot of different things to do and a lot of different areas that they're being pulled in. And so I have less of a concern with the contents of what are going to be in this when OLO takes over, although I do think we need to provide policy guidance, in the legislation. I think our ability as a legislative branch to send it back to OLO and saying these are not helping us do our job is much easier once we've moved it over, rather than having a situation where we say, well, we'll try to do these, but if we don't do them, it doesn't really matter because we can pass the bill anyway. And to me, that's what, while I appreciate the legal rationale behind it, that's what the staff recommendation does in my view.
Okay.
I
I think we're in agreement that we
We're
want to do the
okay with,
should.
let me just make sure I get it clear. We're going to leave 1, 2, and 4 as musts.
Yes.
And then we'll have to make some little revisions here, but number 3 will be should include.
Yes, I'd be comfortable with that if my colleagues are.
And then leave lines 40 to 42 the way they are in the bill as introduced.
Yes. Agree to agree.
Yeah.
So so on 20, so is it line 26 that it's going to say each economic impact statement should include?
No, it's going to say
No?
must for 1, 2, and 4, and then I'm going to
Sources,
create a
okay,
new
the
sentence
description.
that says the economic
just
impact
3 would be,
statement
okay.
should include,
This one,
and then
okay.
number 3.
Got it.
And then we leave 40 to 42
Yeah.
alone, and that's 3-0 for the bill as amended.
Council Vice President Katz.
My only concern about number 2 as a must is that it says any variable. Well, you start doing any variable, and that could be how it affects a direct business or how it affects a direct, so I don't know if the word any is going to help us out here.
Should any be taken out?
You want to take out any?
I think a description
Of variables.
of variables that could affect. And I think that way, that gives you some leeway here. Thanks.
We like that.
Okay, so 1, 2, and 4 are musts with the exclusion of the word any and 2, and make variable plural, and then paragraph 3 becomes a should.
Yep.
And I'll have to do a little rewriting, but I understand that. And then, all right, and then 40 and 40, lines 40 to
We're
42.
going to get the support of the county attorney too, right, in finance, who are thrilled about this.
Lines 40 to 42
It's
stay the same.
definitely better.
And it's 3-0
Yes.
Yeah.
as amended. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned. Yep.
I
was gonna say
actually
something.
did have one concern with the overarching bill, which is the January 1st start date.
Oh,
Working
yeah.
back from HR, we talked about this before. It's going to take some time to hire a position. Generally, I would prefer to start this, the requirement to be started a couple months later. By the time, I can't start on the hiring process, creating a position, or create a data management analyst position. I can't start that until the bill passes, which is, I think, the 30th, once it goes to full council. Getting that done and through HR in the time allotted
What date are
is
you
sometimes
suggesting?
challenging.
What date are you
I'd bump it back 3 months. So February, maybe March 1st. March 1st we'd be able to do this.
March 1st, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm told that the new OHR director nominee is going to change processes overnight. Everything's going
mean,
to
if you-
work quickly, and
March 1st and-
I feel very confident in that, but I think, I don't want to put you in a difficult situation, so I'm
I'm
okay
happy to
with
say at
amending
start
March
at latest
1st.
March 1st.
March
We can start earlier if we get through the confidence I have in getting that through HR in that time.
I'm confident that you're going to work really hard to do it faster than that, but I'm okay with not
So March
putting you in a tough
1st,
position.
2020. Awesome, that's another amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
These controversies, I mean, people just think,